Something happened today that the American press is covering in pieces and fragments, but has not yet assembled into the single picture that every American taxpayer deserves to see whole. Today, April 2nd, 2026, while you were going about your Thursday, 40 countries held a virtual meeting chaired by British Foreign Secretary Yvette to figure out how to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which 20% of the world's oil supply used to flow before the war that the United States started 33 days ago closed it to almost all traffic. Canada was in that room. The United Kingdom was in that room. France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Australia, the UAE, South Korea, New Zealand, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and more than 20 other nations were in that room. The United States was not in that room. Because last night, in a primetime address to the nation from the cross hall of the White House, Donald Trump looked into the camera and told the countries of the world that depend on oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz to go handle it themselves. He said they must grab it and cherish it. He said the hard part is done. He said go to the strait and just take it. And then he said the United States would not be doing that. Not its job, not its problem. And today, exactly as he said that, 40 countries that he has spent 33 days berating, threatening, insulting, and pressuring to join his war, sat down together and started building the post-American order for global energy security. Without him, without his permission, without even a seat at the table for Washington. You need to hit that subscribe button right now and tap the bell before we continue. Because this channel is the only place assembling the complete picture of how Canada and its allies are navigating the most consequential geopolitical crisis in decades and what it means for North American trade, for the USMCA countdown that is now 90 days away, for the oil prices at your gas pump, and for the question of what American leadership in the world actually looks like on April 2nd, 2026. What happened today is not a side story. It is the main story. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Here is the complete picture. Let us start with exactly what happened last night, because the Trump speech of April 1st, 2026, delivered from the cross hall of the White House at 9 in the evening, is the pivot point around which everything else in today's story turns. Trump delivered a 19-minute address that CNN described as offering the most coherent explanation he has yet given for why the United States went to war against Iran. He defended Operation Epic Fury. He said the Iranian military had been devastated. He said regime change had effectively occurred with the deaths of top Iranian leadership. He said nuclear sites had been destroyed. And then he said the war would continue for 2 to 3 more weeks, with strikes of extreme intensity, bringing Iran back to what he called the Stone Ages where they belong. That line, confirmed verbatim by CNBC, CNN, Reuters, The Washington Post, and every major wire service that carried the speech, sent oil markets into immediate convulsion. Brent crude jumped 6.7% to $107.92 per barrel within minutes of the speech ending. WTI surged 6.2% to $106.39. Asian stock markets reversed earlier gains and turned sharply negative as traders processed the reality that the war they had been hoping would end imminently was now being extended, by the president's own words, for at least 3 more weeks of extreme escalation. Japan's Nikkei fell. South Korea's Kospi dropped nearly 3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell. This is not analysis. This is the market's instantaneous verdict on a speech that was supposed to reassure the world and instead told it to prepare for more of the same. And then came the line that triggered today's meeting of 40 countries. Trump said in the same speech that the countries of the world that receive oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage. He said they must cherish it. He said they must grab it. And he said in the clearest possible language that the United States of America was not going to do that. The country that started the war, that closed the strait, that has been pressuring every ally for 33 days to join the effort to reopen it, that threatened the United Kingdom and France with consequences for refusing to send their warships into an active conflict zone, stood up in prime time and told the world that Hormuz is not America's problem anymore. Go handle it. Hard part is done. Good luck. Drop a comment right now. When you heard that Trump told the world to go reopen the Strait of Hormuz themselves because America was done with it, did you know that 40 countries immediately responded by holding a formal meeting today to do exactly that without inviting Washington? Did you know that Canada, the country Trump spent a year calling the 51st state and its prime minister a governor, is one of 35 nations that signed a formal joint declaration demanding Iran cease its blockade and pledging to contribute to safe passage efforts? Did you know that the joint declaration was posted on the official UK government website and lists Canada alongside France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Australia, the UAE, South Korea, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and 20 more nations? Leave your answer below right now, because if you did not know Canada was in that room and Washington was not, you have been getting a very incomplete picture of this story. Now let us talk about what Canada's presence in this coalition actually means and why it matters in ways that go beyond the immediate crisis. Mark Carney made a specific and deliberate strategic choice when the United States first tried to recruit allies into the Hormuz operation. He said no. Canada declined Trump's request to join the military effort to reopen the strait by force. That decision was confirmed and reported at the time by CBC News, which noted that Canada and its allies were indicating they would only get involved in the strait if there were efforts to de-escalate the situation and end the strikes. Canada was not going to send Royal Canadian Navy vessels into an active combat zone to provide cover for a war it had publicly declined to join. That is not weakness. That is the precise application of a strategic posture that Carney has been executing since the war began. You do not join a fire you did not start. You do not send your sailors into someone else's battlefield, but you do sign every joint diplomatic statement. You do participate in every multilateral coalition. You do show up at every table where the non-military response is being coordinated. And today, when 40 countries held the most significant coalition meeting since the war began to address the global energy crisis that the war has created, Canada was at that table and the United States was not. This distinction matters enormously for what happens at the USMCA negotiating table 90 days from now, because the framing that has been used in Washington throughout this trade war is that Canada is the dependent partner, the smaller country, the nation that needs American goodwill to survive economically. And what has been happening for 33 days of this war is the systematic demolition of that framing by events. The country that needs Canadian oil to run its Midwest refineries just told the world it does not care about the strait that supplies 20% of global oil. The country that is dependent on Canadian potash to feed its agricultural sector just extended a war that is destroying fertilizer supply chains through Hormuz. The country whose Supreme Court struck down its own tariffs as illegal just threatened to leave the military alliance that Canada joined at the same time America did in 1949. And today, the country that has been running a trade war against Canada while simultaneously running a shooting war in the Middle East watched as 40 nations, including Canada, organized a global energy security coalition and did not bother to include Washington in the meeting. Picture the specific visual of today's coalition meeting. British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper at her screen in London, opening the virtual meeting at midday GMT. The representatives of France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Japan, Canada, Australia, South Korea, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, the UAE, Bahrain, New Zealand, and more than 20 additional nations, each in their respective capitals, connected on a secure video call designed to coordinate diplomatic, economic, and eventually logistical measures to restore freedom of navigation through a strait that is the economic lifeline of the global economy. Cooper opened the meeting by saying that Iran has hijacked an international shipping route to hold the global economy hostage. Canada's representative sat in that meeting as a signatory to the joint declaration that commits every attending nation to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure safe passage. 40 countries, all in, United States not present, not invited, not even mentioned as a constructive partner, because the president had literally said the night before that it was not America's problem. And this is the moment that reveals the complete strategic picture, because what Carney has been building since the day he took office is not just a trade diversification strategy. It is a position of indispensable multilateral engagement that means Canada is present at every consequential table at precisely the moment when the United States is absent from all of them. The EU-CPTPP bridge that Carney is spearheading, connecting 40 countries and $15 trillion of trade. The Canada-Mercosur deal moving at record speed, the 12 deals on 4 continents, the NATO 2% commitment confirmed by the Secretary General, and now the Hormuz coalition of 40 nations. At every single one of these tables, Canada is a participant, a signatory, a builder, a convener, and at every single one of them, the United States is either absent, opposed, or irrelevant to the outcome. That is not coincidence. That is the consequence of a year of American policy that treated its closest allies as adversaries while simultaneously expecting them to follow American military leadership into a conflict none of them wanted. The economic numbers that frame this moment are staggering in their human directness. GasBuddy's head of petroleum analysis, Patrick DeHaan, posted today that retail gasoline prices in the United States could surge to $4.25 to $4.45 per gallon in the next 2 weeks at the current pace. Diesel could reach $5.80 to $6.05 per gallon. TD Securities senior commodity strategist Ryan McKay said in a note to clients today that nearly 1 billion barrels will be lost by the end of April, comprising up to 600 million barrels of crude and roughly 350 million barrels of refined products, including jet fuel, diesel, and gasoline. Every month the war continues, an additional 450 million barrels are lost. These numbers are not projections from a doom scenario. They are the baseline math of a strait that was carrying 20% of global oil supply before a war closed it, with a president who said last night it would be hit extremely hard for at least 2 to 3 more weeks. Every American family that drives a car, heats a home, buys groceries transported by diesel truck, or runs a small business with any fuel cost exposure is living inside these numbers right now. And the question that every one of those families deserves to have answered is this: who is in the room trying to fix it? The answer, confirmed today by Al Jazeera, Euronews, the Associated Press, and the Washington Times, is 40 countries led by the United Kingdom and including Canada. And who is not in the room? The answer is the country that started the war that created the problem. That started it 33 days ago. That has no exit strategy. That said last night it would continue for weeks. That called the alliance that could solve it a paper tiger. And that told the world to go grab the strait and cherish it because America was done. There is one more layer to this story that the mainstream American coverage is not fully connecting. Trump's approval rating on the economy, confirmed by a CNN poll published yesterday, is 31%. Just 1/3 of the American public believes he has a clear plan to handle the situation in Iran. Roughly 2/3 of Americans say his policies are contributing to worsening economic conditions. These are the numbers of a presidency in serious political trouble heading into a midterm election that is 7 months away. And the policy environment that has produced those numbers, the trade war, the oil shock, the NATO fracture, the abandoned allies, the speech that sent oil above $106, is the same environment in which Carney will be sitting across from Greer at the USMCA table 90 days from now. The prime minister who is at every multilateral table, whose country is in the Hormuz coalition, whose NATO commitment was confirmed in Brussels, who has 12 deals on 4 continents, sitting across from the representative of a president whose approval on the economy is 31% and whose speech last night sent oil to $107. This is what the Carney strategy looks like in its full operational reality on April 2nd, 2026. Not a press release, not a diplomatic speech, a physical presence at a 40-nation meeting in London today, a signature on a joint declaration published on the UK government's official website. A country that said no to the war and yes to the coalition. A country that is not at the table that is causing the crisis and is at the table that is trying to solve it. A country that has built enough multilateral capital, enough diplomatic credibility, enough trade diversification, and enough strategic patience over the last year that when the moment of maximum global economic pressure arrived today, it was one of the 35 nations whose name is on the declaration, not one of the nations that was not invited. If this video gave you the complete picture of what happened today, what it means for every American paying $4 for gas and heading toward $4.50, what it means for the USMCA countdown that is 90 days away, and what it says about which country is building the future and which country is burning the present, share this right now with every American who deserves to understand that the moment the United States said Hormuz is not our problem, 40 countries, including Canada, quietly became the most consequential diplomatic coalition on earth. Share it with every person in your life who thinks the trade war has isolated Canada. Canada was in that meeting today. Washington was not. Share this.